Hello and welcome to another episode of the Executive Hub Show, the show that helps you grow your business with tips and strategies from successful entrepreneurs. My guest today is my dear friend Heather Pearce Campbell. Welcome, Heather.
Hello, Mustafa. So good to see you again.
Likewise, great to have you. I look forward to our conversation. We've been friends since 2016 or 17, getting to 10 years or so soon.
No.
It's a long time. Love Heather. She's actually one of the few lawyers that I like and trust. And she's like a lawyer with a heart, and you know you can trust her and work with her and know that she's nice and approachable. And
Happy to be on that short list. It always makes me happy when I hear oh, I would have never known you're a lawyer.
exactly, yeah, you don't have a lawyer vibe.
I have warrior mama vibe, and that's the
Yes,
same vibe I bring to my clients' businesses.
absolutely. So we're talking about how to legally protect your small business online. Everything online, as that's what Heather does. I'm going to dive more into it. Let me do the proper bio for Heather, and we're going to get it started. Heather Pearce Campbell, the legal website warrior, is a warrior mama, nature lover, and dedicated attorney for world-changing entrepreneurs. Based in Seattle, she is the founder of Pearce Law PLLC and the creator of Legal Website Warrior, where she helps coaches, consultants, and online experts protect their businesses with practical, powerful legal support. Heather is a sought-after speaker, the host of the Guts and Great Business podcast, and mom to two wild munchkins and Maggie, the family cattledog. When not building legal shields for changemakers, she is likely outdoors in the Pacific Northwest, reading her way through stacks of books and sneaking in an episode of HGTV. Heather, how's your day so far?
Really good. I joke that when it's a sunny day in Seattle, we have nothing to complain about here.
Beautiful. So let's get into it. What is your story, Heather?
Well, my story starts off with, first of all, me being a kid growing up that never once thought about going to law school, never once thought about becoming an attorney. I didn't know any attorneys. It was not a thing in my family. And then I went off to business school, and it was my last year of school studying finance and economics that I realized I wanted more education. I didn't want more business. And I happened to be in a business law class at the time, as well as like an upper level writing class. And I chose legal ethics in business as something to write on. And that is what launched me into pursuing law as my next step.
Beautiful. And then was there so you started writing about law?
Yeah, I had to research that class required that I go interview attorneys, research people about the actual, practice of law, have, interviews. And it was just, I remember thinking wow, I would have never considered this. But I was also the weird kid that in the business law course, everyone else was falling asleep and I was like front row Joe. Like the
Wow.
problems were interesting to me, right? And it was through a conversation with my mom where she was like, Heather, this feels like a fit for you. And we probably spent about an hour and a half talking about it. And then I went and applied for the LSATs. And it was one of those moments in life where you're going along, and suddenly you take a big right turn. And later you're like, of course I took that big right turn. Like, of course this was the correct path, even though I would have never seen it coming.
Interesting. So what inspired you? Was there like an event to lead you to focus on online aspect of law?
Well, that evolved. So my career, when I started out, first of all, I launched my own practice. I went here to UW Law in Seattle. I launched my own practice right out of law school and right away began working for small businesses, solo entrepreneurs, people who needed project-based support, couldn't get it, typically because of budget, right? And I was scrappy. I was willing to research things. I was willing to come up with like pretty unique solutions for these clients. And at the same time, I was getting myself onto bigger projects. I worked with a variety of law firms in town. And so I got great experience, but I also along the way was able to manage my own career and take in clientele that I wanted to serve. And it was always the small businesses that I most enjoyed. And so it became pretty exclusively online businesses when I transitioned to a virtual law office myself. This was right before I had kids, started having kids. And it was also, I would say, it paralleled tremendous growth in the online space for small businesses. So I just spotted a need. And my creative sense about the law and about how I could do things differently was really specifically targeted towards small businesses.
Interesting. Was there any other type of law that you practiced before you focusing on online?
Yeah, totally. So here's the irony is when I was in law school, also again, one of these like, oh, I never conceived of doing that. I did not want to do litigation. I was like, that is not for me. I don't want to have to go be fighting every day of my life with other people and sometimes really outrageous people. And what did I end up doing right out of law school? Loads of litigation.
I
There are ways, I will just say, there are ways that the universe bumps us along and gives us the experiences that we need to get where we're supposed to be going. That's a spiritual belief that I hold. And that was one of those things where I'm like, well, here I am doing a bunch of litigation. I could have never anticipated this. And it really gave me excellent training, really good legal chops around dispute resolution, around studying human behavior and personalities in the context of disputes, and applying that to the business setting.
Interesting.
Mhm.
I think sometimes I notice myself talking about something that I don't want to do,
Yeah.
and then I end up doing exactly that thing. So every time I start it, I'm like, maybe I'm gonna do that. So I be careful about
Maybe I shouldn't say
voicing it
that.
out loud, projecting it online that I don't want to do this. Next thing I know, I'm neck deep in that. So
Oh my gosh, that's funny. And
I
do
think,
you know in law school, because I never signed up for like moot court or any of that stuff, which is where you get training if you know like you're going to be a litigator or you want to go work in a government office like a prosecutor's office, right? Because there's government work. For me, how I ended up learning some of that stuff was one of my classmates signed me up as his mock trial partner without even asking me. And suddenly all the mock trial schedules got published and my name is all over the place alongside his. And I was like in one of these positions of like, WTF, what
Mhm.
do I do? And for a hot second, I was mad. I was like, this is unacceptable. I did not agree to this or sign myself up. And then there was a part of me that's like, okay, what the hell? Let's do this. Let me just see what happens. And we ended up being one of the two winning teams that went on to nationals that year.
Wow.
Again, another one of those little, like, really
I
weird,
don't want to do this.
unexpected, yeah, unexpected kicks from the universe of like, here, you're doing this. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Funny. I was never an academic. I was like, I don't want to go to university. I hate like getting a PhD and this and that. Next thing I know, I probably have studied and read more books than probably a combination of 12 PhDs.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I believe it.
Sometimes I feel like I have overeducated myself on certain areas, like with business and reading too many books. Anyways, so I'm careful about what I'm saying now. Um,
Right, right.
so what do you do these days, and who do you serve?
Mm. So these days, who I really enjoy serving I call them change makers. They're industry leaders. These are folks who are looking at the impact they can make through their work. They're really impact-based businesses, even if they're small, right? And I serve exclusively small businesses. And this is because I am a big believer that small businesses, we're the innovators of the world. We drive change, we drive positive change. We create massive, first of all, massive influence in economic cycles, GDP, right? Small businesses are responsible for, oh, what is the number? I wish I was up on my latest percentages. It's like 60 or 70% of new hires collectively over the last 20 years. Small businesses, not big business, right? So together as a group, we have massive influence and massive opportunity to influence change for good. So I'm just a big believer that small businesses are entitled to excellent support. They deserve high quality support. They're typically under-resourced, and that's why I really made it a mission to create a set of tools, trainings, like doing stuff differently in my business to make that much more accessible.
Beautiful. What are the problems that you solve for your customers, and how do you go about helping them with that?
Yeah. What I typically see in the small business world in general, and again, I just mentioned that small businesses are typically quite under-resourced, is that people don't get their hands on these tools early enough in their business building journey, right? So I do a lot of educating in the marketplace. I'm a big believer, in particular, because the legal world, I call it the black box legal model. The traditional legal world has made it really hard for people to get the basic information that they need to do business better from a legal perspective. And for me, I'm a big believer that we can educate first. We can help create the kind of client that shows up to our door to do business. And the way that you create a better client is you help them with their mindset even before they show up to your door. So educating is the first thing, like helping to give people the roadmap to their business from a legal perspective before they're even aware of how much they need it, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is accessibility. There's a huge access to justice problem in the legal world, especially for small businesses and individual consumers. So the other problem that I aim to solve is just making legal support and legal knowledge tailored to a very specific group of people much more accessible. I could get into the basics of like legal foundation, like what I actually solve for people is helping them build out their legal foundation so they have a stronger, more robust business that survives all kinds of problems that tend to pop up for small businesses, right? But that's a long list. That's something that we can get into over the course of the conversation. But what I primarily focus on is access, so that people actually have access to the resources they need.
Love it. Yeah, I know a lot of small businesses cannot afford to work with, say, a lawyer. Some of them don't have time, don't have the team, the resources, and the rest of it. So what you do out there, educating them with your courses and training and all the stuff you do, is amazing to just make it more accessible, I guess.
Yep.
And you're also, the other thing about you is you're approachable, which makes a huge difference.
Well,
You know,
thank you. Yes, I really appreciate that. And actually, I care a great deal about that because the number of times I've worked with somebody where they're like, I had an attorney before and I did not feel like this is something I could tackle. Like they made me feel stupid or they talked over me
yeah,
and it's like power to the people. I want my clients to show up and be like, I got this. I understand this. It's like a tool. Like, you have very specific expertise that you deliver to your clients.
hmm
And even in the marketing space or now the IA space or the AI space, making that much more accessible, right? It's like delivering a tool into the hands of your client saying, you can do this. I can support you, but you can do this. And here's the tool to do it the right way. And I just think the more that we empower people to understand enough that they know how and when to use the right tools, Legal is no different than having to, understand and develop and redevelop a sales strategy, a marketing strategy, an IT strategy, information systems strategy. We have to learn all these things
Yeah.
to run a business. Legal's no different. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people opt out because they think, oh, that's just too complex.
Oh God, like the different aspects of legal, I think aspects of a business is very complicated. It's just there's just so many different things to consider when it comes to, and we're gonna guys dive into it in a bit. The name, trademark, terms, conditions. Now we got GDPR, UN. I mean, Europe and Canada and US, and then FTC. And God, oh my goodness, it's a complex world, and I'm sure you could give us more examples. And I think people don't take it serious until they get into trouble.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. We tend to be very pain avoidant. We are not going to inflict pain on ourselves by opening Pandora's box most of the time. And that's what people worry about with law is like, oh my gosh, it's going to be never ending. I'm going to open Pandora's
Oh yeah,
box and then I won't be able to deal with it. It's not actually that way. While there is, and you named it, it feels complex, it feels scary. It is not nearly as bad as you think it is once you
okay,
get the right support to look at it in the right way. And that's where I care deeply that people have the map. It's a little bit like, well, let's take health as an example, right? How many people have ever struggled with a health issue in their life where your brain starts going a little crazy? Like, is it diet? Is it hormones? Is it, medication that I'm taking? Is it this? Like, there are so many, like, what is it? It tends to be this, like, for people who are really challenged with a health issue, it can be overwhelming because you don't know where to look,
mm-hmm.
right? And then you meet with a naturopath who's skilled at assessing different things, and they're like, oh, like, and I'll use a personal example from right after graduating law school. I was actually having stress-induced hypoglycemia. The traditional medical world was like, you have MS, you need a spinal tap, you need, this long list of
Yeah,
like crazy stuff. I went to a naturopath who assessed my journal, like my health journal of diet, sleep. I'd been tracking everything. And he goes, oh, you have a single thing going on that's causing all these other problems for you. You need to eat more protein. This is just dietary. Made that one change. You just need to eat more protein. I want you to do this and add this much protein to each meal and track it for a couple weeks and come back and report on how you're feeling. That's it. He solved this long list of problems by just
right.
looking at it in
One,
the right lens and saying like, oh, you just got to have more protein.
was that a doctor?
Yeah, naturopathic doctor.
Oh, interesting.
This is the benefit of working with somebody who can
Yeah,
help you shift your perspective
yeah,
around where to look,
yeah,
right? So this is why I work very hard to give people the map. Like, these are the areas, these are the buckets. Anytime you do a new thing in your business, you're going to be looking in one of these buckets. That's it. And it's
yeah.
the same map, it's the same buckets, whether you are, making $200,000 a year or $2 million a year as a small business.
Interesting. I think things become more complex and they look and feel more complex when you don't know what you're doing. But like, I guess similar to what you do. Like, I help people make marketing simple,
Mhm.
and because it could be very complex.
Yes, and
Like
it
when they
feels
talk to
that
me, then
way.
I'm like, just try this for like 2 weeks. Forget about all the shiny stuff you see on Facebook and here and there. Just focus on this one thing. They're like, is that possible? I'm like, let's try. you know,
That's
but
it.
it feels
You're
the same
right.
for me when it comes to legal.
Yeah,
There's like so many things, but then they come up to you and you make it easy.
that's right. And I remember, I will just put a little pitch in for you, having gone through your seminar. I am somebody who even still marketing feels complex to. It is not my bag. I don't love it. There are certain things that I love in business. I love connecting with people. I love learning about my clients. I love doing the work. I don't love having to do a bunch of the bells and whistles, right?
Hmm.
So like, I get it. And hearing you be like, master this one thing, like just choose one thing and do
Hmm.
that really well. I think, again, that reframe of talking to an expert who can help it be more accessible is one of the most impactful things we can do for our business in
100%.
whatever area, in whatever area. And legal actually is no different. I am
Yeah.
never going to tell somebody, you got to run around and go do all these 29 things at once. That is not what I have
Yeah.
ever done to a client or will ever do. I will say there's a map, there's an order of priority.
Yeah.
Let's start with the most important thing based on where you are on
Yeah.
your journey. And then we can talk about how to stage the rest, right?
Yeah, I was thinking like when people come up to you, I'm guessing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably like 20 things to do, but you'd be like, just do this one thing first based on where you're at, just like, a diagnosis of a doctor, be like, do it, just add protein. That's it.
Mhm.
then and then I'll tell you about the next step based on what happens, and or here's the plan and we're going to implement step by step.
Yes, exactly. It's, I mean, this is a terrible metaphor, the elephant one about eating an elephant. Nobody should be eating elephants, but you don't do it all at once. You don't build anything with any think of it a machine. You don't like it's step by step. You are not just like suddenly building a whole machine all at one time. It is one foot after the other, right? So
Hmm.
so legal is no different, and that is part of the way that I slow people down, like get them out of panic mode, reset their nervous system. No, you do not have to do this all at once. There is generally an order of priority for small businesses, and I walk them through that. And depending on where somebody is in their own business journey, based on what you said earlier, potential fires or issues they may have popping up currently, we might
Hmm.
have to address those first. But yeah, if I can get people ahead of the curve, we're going to do some proactive things, hopefully well before we have to start putting out fires.
Speaking of proactive things, I was talking to my my business partner, about security for our AI app.
Mhm.
And, he was a little hesitant about working on some of this stuff. And I was like, can we afford, if someone sues us, if you have a data leak, can I afford a lawsuit? If someone, a big company, small, just comes back and says, your data leak cost us so much. And if
That's
it's
right.
ends up in the wrong hands, can I afford that? Right? The answer is no.
That's right. It's a very simple question. And let's talk about a data breach, like this exact scenario for a small business. On
Okay.
average, a data breach or data breach costs a small business $200 per client record, right? Yeah. And we're even talking about name, email, address, maybe payment information, but like the basic stuff that people are after, contact identity information in relation to a set of data. If you have a small list of 500 people, do the math on what that would cost your business. A
Yeah.
hundred, yeah, $100,000.
Yes.
That is to basically follow up with the right type of compliance steps, hiring legal counsel, so that, because also depending on where you're based, depending on where your client list is based, you're going to have different regulations in all 50 states in the United States with different compliance requirements, different timelines. A small problem quickly becomes a very big,
Very big problem.
complex problem if you are not proactive about what you're doing.
What are the potential consequences for a data breach? Like, I've seen where I get an email from, say, Yahoo, saying, "Oh, there's been a data breach. Update your password." Could
Right.
there be any? What are the other consequences that could happen, like to the company?
Right. So typically what you're going to look at first of all is what data was breached, right? So you're going to have to review whatever scenario occurs to determine what is the data that has been breached, and then therefore what are your compliance requirements after the fact. Is it a simple notice? Is it like one of those statements you get from a bank that's like, multiple pages and fine print and, here's deadlines and here's where you can go sign up for identity theft monitoring for the next year, right? So it largely depends on what data is breached. And then depending on that, right, you should have legal counsel in place to help you meet those notice requirements. Because here's the other problem is if you don't send out proper notice to the people that were impacted and their information is running around on the dark web or somewhere now because you didn't have security protocols in place and you don't notify them properly, you've got pile up penalties, like regulatory penalties that can be assessed against you that are pretty hefty, right? So
is that dealing with the FTC?
FTC, I mean, also state by state regulatory bodies, because you also have privacy regulations and privacy and notice requirements that are state specific. Right. So there's a couple things as a business owner that you want to consider depending on what you are building. One is making sure that you absolutely are looking into what is the industry standard for security in your industry, right? So for example, I'm in the legal industry. You're going to have mandatory password protection and encryption, right, for any data that should be transmitted in certain ways. So first of all, you might have to do some research for whatever industry you or your business kind of lives in, right? So because they're going to be industry specific standards. But then in general, what are security measures that you can take to help protect that data? Right. And part of this is an internal controls situation where you better train up your team. So many data breaches, by the way, happen because a team member accesses data in the wrong location. It's not protected. It's over an open network. They're traveling. They're not using password protocols and passwords become viewable, whatever the case may be. But it's generally based on a team member doing something wrong, right?
Interesting.
Or clicking on one of those emails or whatever. There's a variety of ways that it can happen. So also making sure that you have internal, even for small team, internal protocols where everybody's on the same page. They know that there's a password manager in place. They know they should be not writing down or accessing passwords in any other way. They know that if they're ever on any network but their own, it's, VPN access only, that you've taken regular standard security measures. And then also, you're going to want to make sure that you have terms and policies in place that are consumer facing that describe certain risks to your potential customers or clients around the use of that tool, right? That's super critical. In the privacy world, there's two parts of it. Say what you do what you say. So in privacy, what often happens is people are like, oh, I'm going to grab this privacy policy off of this other website that I love, or off of this business site that's kind of like my own, and I'm just going to copy it and paste it and put it up here for my small business. Not understanding, you also have to change your own business practices. You have to change the way that you interact with and relate to data so that you are complying with your own privacy policies, right? And then there's certain things that obviously privacy policies have to address, which is why generally I'm going to recommend that small businesses get support with that piece. The third thing that I generally recommend around data security, potential data breaches, depending on what you're building in your business, is a cybersecurity policy or a specific data breach policy, right? And those are going to be priced a little differently, but you would go to a typical insurance company. If you already have, for example, general liability insurance, I'd go back to that company and ask them about their options in the data breach or cybersecurity world and have them provide quotes, and then go get some competitive quotes and see what is available to you based on what your business is doing. That is definitely an option to consider.
So for privacy policy, you mentioned say what you do, and what are some other things that should be mentioned on a privacy policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the types of things that you're going to address in a well-drafted privacy policy is, what data are you collecting in the first place, right? Pretty much everybody in the world at this point has heard of the GDPR, which is a law that took effect in the EU, like the General Data Protection Regulation. In the EU, it took effect, I think, May 18th or 28th, something in there, May 2018. But every company in the world was sending out all these notifications about upcoming implementation of the GDPR. That shifted the framework really in the whole world because of the nature of businesses, even small businesses, being not only interstate or interregion, but international in nature. Everybody had to become aware of the fact that we shifted from a framework that used to be more data is better to presumptive privacy where less data is better, right? So if you remember, the rules around opting in changed, where people used to have to opt out of hearing from a company. No, I don't want to receive your marketing. You now have to actively opt in. It shifted the whole thing on its head, which I think for a lot of reasons is good. It has helped businesses become much more conscientious about, what data do I really need to run my business? When that law took effect, I had people come to me that were sitting on like 20 years of list building data. So much of it old and outdated, right? Where I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what are you doing with this? Like, yeah, you've been around since the internet began, but you don't need all of this data.
Right.
Right? So yeah, so with privacy, the rule now is you need to be very clear about what data you're collecting and why. You have to have a legally sufficient reason for collecting that data, right? And you now have legal obligations that go with that, primarily around how long do you keep the data? Like, how long is
Hmm.
this data relevant? So you've probably seen updates from time to time from small businesses or companies that are conscientious about that, saying, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while, or you haven't been opening our emails. We're going to be removing you from our list if you don't indicate that you want to continue to hear from us. That's actually not optional under the GDPR. That's pretty mandatory. Not necessarily that you have to notify people, but that you have to have a time limit in place around how long you technically need or are going to be utilizing that data. And then
Got
you
it.
need to, when, that's the do what you say part, the say what you do part. The do what you say is actually then engaging in those cleanup behaviors on the back end, like putting a schedule in place. Like every 6 months, you're going to review your list. Every 6 months, you're going to review your purchase records. Who still needs to remain in your database or on certain lists? Who needs to be cleansed from those lists?
100%. 100%. What about um how are we doing for time? I want to manage my questions so we get the
Totally,
most out of this.
totally. And I will
So
just say really quick on wrapping up for privacy, there's going to be a list of other issues, like, do you engage in retargeting behaviors? How can somebody opt out of your database or get their information deleted from your list? That's a really important part of the GDPR, right? And I reference the GDPR not because it governs every country, but because it is the new standard. And if you are going cross-border, if you shape your policies towards GDPR compliance, you are going to be meeting a lot of requirements that exist in other countries' laws that are imitating the GDPR.
so GDPR is for Europe, right?
Uh-huh. The EU.
So you're in US, I'm in Canada.
Yep.
Could I say, hey, I'm in Canada, I only serve Canadians, I don't care about GDPR?
Yeah, you can. And I would ask you, so are you creating restrictions on website accessibility so that you do not have people opting in from out of country?
So I will block people from Europe and say, hey, we don't serve you?
That's right. Because here's the problem is if you have collected their information, you are subject to the GDPR.
Interesting. So you couldn't say, We abide by Canadian laws or US laws. Only opt in if you care or want to.
No, unfortunately, you don't get to self-select. This is the thing about law in general is, first of all, you're presumed to know the law that applies to you. And under the GDPR, the law applies to you if you are collecting information or data from subjects that live within the EU. Full stop.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about trademark, what it is, and who should care about it.
Totally.
And I'm going to make you full screen so people can pay attention to this.
Excellent. Yeah. So trademarks in general, if you talk about like, because a lot of people hear IP protection, right? And some people think copyright, some people think trademark, some people think, what is the difference? What even is IP? IP stands for intellectual property, right? And in the course of owning, operating, starting businesses, the reality is we create pretty excessive amounts of IP, most of us, especially those that I serve, that I call information businesses, online businesses, right? We are often also expert based. There's a lot of professionals that come into the online space because they've built a body of work, they have certain key knowledge that they want to share in interesting ways. But even regular, quote unquote, traditional businesses that also have an online presence often have a lot of IP to protect. So, intellectual property, just think of as any proprietary creations that you create as part of your business journey. This includes the name or title of your business. Like if you are creating a brand, you're going through branding exercises and you are creating a distinguished look and feel for your business, that's proprietary. Unique phrases or taglines. So my quick example on trademarks in particular is let's use Nike, right? Everybody knows Nike. Nike, you have the title Nike, which is the brand name. That's protectable via trademark. You have the logo, the swoosh, right? That logo is protectable via trademark. You also have the tagline, just do it. That is also protectable by trademark. That, in a nutshell, sums up what trademarks protect. It's a
Mm-hmm.
name, a short phrase, or a logo, right? Trademarks, if you think of your brand or your business like a mountain, my quick analogy is, and I'm in Seattle. You look out these windows here on a sunny day, or go out onto the street on one of the major like cross sections in our neighborhood, you can see Mount Rainier in the distance. I ask people from the marketplace, what is viewable from from the standpoint of your business? It's the snow-capped peaks. It is these things that are protectable via trademark. Your brand name, your logo, right? These are business identifiers, and these are the snow-capped peaks of your mountain that represents your brand or your business. That is what you protect with a trademark. The rest of the mountain, let's call it the body of your work. Maybe you're a consultant like you, Mustafa. You create trainings, you go into businesses and you consult with them on strategy. You have a variety of ways that you deliver your information and expertise. The body of your work is protectable via copyright registrations, right? This is like your videos, your workbooks, your some of the methodologies and the tools that you create. This stuff you protect with copyright registration. So think of the body of the mountain you protect with copyright. That's the body of your work. And just a quick note on copyrights. Copyright protects your unique expression of the idea, not the idea itself. So this is why when I sit down to do an assessment with my clients, I ask them, because most of them know, what are your most powerful assets? What are the things that you are covering over and over and over with your clients? And what is the best representation of that in your work? For some of my clients, they're going to be like, oh, I have this awesome video series. Somebody else might be like, oh, yeah, I've actually written a book, or I've written a workbook, or I have some other way that is a really great representation of the expression of those ideas, right? That's where we're generally going to start with core assets is those key copyright items, make sure that they're registered, and then also the trademark registrations to protect those upper level brand assets.
All right. So I got, oh God, a list of questions. When should someone worry about the trademarking their brand name and the rest of the stuff?
That's a great question, and it's a really key point in time because there's kind of no looking back once you hit this point in time. So my litmus test question for my clients is whatever the phrase or the logo, pretend they hired somebody to develop a beautiful logo, or there's a phrase that they use that they decided is great for their brand, or they actually created a brand name that they love, is how would you feel if somebody else used it in the business marketplace and they were able to preclude you from using it? Some people are
I
like,
agree.
oh, well, I'm not that attached. I would actually just come up with a different name. I'm like, okay, great. So you don't feel a huge sense of ownership over that title or that name. But for people who are like, oh, I'd be ticked, I'd be mad if somebody, I'm like, okay, that is to me tells me that you have a sense of creation and ownership over this phrase or name. And then I would go to the next step, which is then helping them identify, is this protectable? Ideally, you intersect with somebody like myself before you actually choose your brand name or choose your branding, because there are some pitfalls in the trademark world around whether or not you've chosen a name or a phrase that is merely descriptive or generic. So let me give you an example. Somebody came to me and was like, I want to protect my training and it's called the 7 steps to blah, blah, blah success. And I'm like, let me guess. There's 7 steps and you're going to teach them how to be successful doing blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yeah. Not
No,
protectable.
not
You
protectable.
cannot protect that. That is descriptive. You cannot remove those words from the dictionary and from other people saying, "Well, I have 7 steps to be successful at blah blah blah," right?
Could you then maybe like protect ultimate success formula? Is
Uh
that protectable?
depending on how it's used, because ultimate success formula in the name itself, I go, "Okay, but I don't know, is that in sports? Is that in a marriage? Is that, you know what I mean? It doesn't like, just hearing it doesn't describe what it is. So that is, I think, moderately protectable. The
Okay.
question then becomes, is somebody else already using it? Is there a registration around that phrase? And particularly, is there a registration around that phrase in the category that you want to use it? Trademarks are registered by class or category. So let's pretend that you're a fitness trainer or even an athletic apparel company,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, whatever, be your best self, some weird phrase, right? Very different than a life coach using that in their life coaching, right? Two different classes or categories. People are not going to be confused. The thing about trademarks is they're actually there to protect the customer. It's a source of goods. It's a source of goods protection, right? People want to know they're buying from a particular source. That is where trademarks evolve from. Because back in the day, if somebody, you're going to buy a shoe and you want to know you're buying a shoe from this particular excellent shoemaker in town, trademarks used to be like a literal stamp on the bottom of the good or the thing that you were buying, indicating the source of those goods. So back to the class or category example, an apparel company that's selling t-shirts and shorts, they could protect a phrase in that class or category. And a life coach could actually protect the same phrase used for consulting or coaching services. Different
And the other
classes.
guy cannot sue. So let's say that Nike has the word Nike protected in apparel and shoes.
Mhm.
Can I use Nike in coaching if they haven't
Probably
filed it for a
not.
class?
Yeah, probably not. Only because those big companies, Coca-Cola, Nike, any of the mega companies, first of all, they're going to get as broad of protection as possible, and they
Mhm.
often carry over into categories that where they don't primarily live, but they get protection in
Just
because
in case.
just in case, or because they're offering up some training on a particular topic or whatever. So, and the big companies also really police the marketplace. So if there is any potential for confusion, and that's the standard, is there potential for confusion in a customer or consumer of those goods based on the new mark? Right? There's a pretty high
Okay.
likelihood of
So,
confusion. If you're using Nike for any purpose in your business, that Nike will come after you or will stop that application from proceeding. But smaller
oh, okay.
businesses, right, that are fairly isolated in a class or category, there's less of that ability to police the marketplace, but also they don't need to exist in every class or category if they're really good at one thing, right?
Uh, so does that mean that how many categories are out there?
Oh gosh, there's a variety. I
Is it
function for
hundreds or thousands of categories
no,
out there?
no, no. Let me just look really quick. I'll tell you how many total. I work, so there's 45 different categories under the USPTO system. Other
Uh-huh.
countries are going to be probably fairly similar. There's also an international category system. So when you register in your own home country, you're going to register in a local class or category, but it's also going to attach an international number for the international classes or categories. So there's 45
Sorry,
different.
for a second interruption. Does that mean that if you want to apply for the international trademark, that's a whole separate application, different office?
It can be, yeah, depending on whether or not you're using. So, like in the U.S., we have WIPO, WIPO, and that might be across countries. Typically, I'm helping clients that if they're international, they're reaching into the U.S. They're specifically seeking a U.S. based registration. So, I work primarily just in the USPTO system,
Got it.
right? But there are ways that you can actually get international registrations. Or for my clients who are US based and we already have their US registrations, I might connect them to local counsel in other countries. If, for example, like one of my clients has a really strong presence in the EU, right? He's got an international brand. He has very specific countries that he wanted protection in, like the UK or certain, EU based countries. And so there are other ways that you can get support either locally or within the European Union to get additional registrations. Um,
Beauty.
yeah,
Um,
but trademarks in general, just understand they're a little bit different than copyrights. And quickly on that point, if you seek copyright registration in your home country, there's a convention called the Berne Convention where like 164 countries have signed on to that convention saying if you have a registration in your home country, we will honor your copyrights here
in
in
our
our
country.
country. Yeah. Different than
Interesting.
trademarks. Trademarks, you actually have to seek registration and protection
In
in a
every country.
market by market basis. Yeah. So this is why you have separate filings based on where you're doing business.
So that international trademark doesn't secure internationally?
No, there's no comprehensive international trademark where you
Oh,
get so you have to look at, so for example, my clients most often have a strong presence if they're US based in Canada, in the UK, potentially Australia, right? Other English speaking countries. Or I have a lot of Canadian clients who are like, oh, 50% of my database is based in the US. That's called reaching into the US to do business. You would be well advised to make sure that you've done some clearance searches in the US for any phrases that you're using, even if you're Canadian based, because like I had a client who had to get into a trademark fight with a US company with a registered mark that he was unknowingly infringing because he had not done searches in the USPTO for that mark, for that phrase. Right. So we ended up in a fight, and then I ended up negotiating the buyout of those registered marks for use in his business
and he was from outside US.
based in Canada.
Okay, and then the US company sold it to them?
Yeah, but at first, after issuing a cease and desist and getting him in trouble for wrongfully using their mark.
Int Okay. So, if there are, say, 45 categories in there, and if I want to have multiple categories to
Mhm.
protect myself and my mark in those categories, is that like a one application applied to 10 different or 20 different categories, or is it 45 different applications?
No. Great question. It's going to be a single application drafted for the applicable categories. So within that application, you're going to list the categories that you're seeking protection in. And
Uh-huh.
there's two bases for protection. Either you're already using it, it's a phrase that you are already using in commerce, or if you're proactive enough and you're like, listen, I'm developing a new brand. I want to make sure that when I launch, nobody else has taken that phrase or that name or developed a logo that looks like this. You can file an application based on intent to use in the future that puts your stake in the ground right now.
Okay.
So, yeah,
And
there's
then
ways
do we
ways.
have to sorry.
No, you're okay.
Do we have to then justify to the office that is reviewing the application that I have a good reason to protect myself there, or is it just like, hey, here's a new name. I think I may actually, or I have plans to develop a product or service in that category in the future. Does that justify, or is that enough?
So, what makes something protectable? Because I think what you're asking is whether or not it's protectable.
Hmm.
Again, gets back to the name or the logo itself, whatever the mark is. And you've got a design mark, that's the logo, or a word mark like Starbucks or the name Nike. Those are both word marks, right?
Hmm.
Um, Whether or not something is protectable is whether or not it meets certain criteria, right? Generally around not being descriptive, not being merely descriptive, not being generic. It has to be a unique identifier.
Yeah,
And this is where if somebody says the word Starbucks, you're not misunderstanding that for anything else, right?
that's right.
Now, something that's merely descriptive, this is actually a good example, is like originally Seattle's best coffee. That phrase, like you can't stop people from saying, I'm
Using that.
selling Seattle's best coffee. Those are descriptive words that go together
Exactly.
geographically, right? So this is also why at the point that you're trying to select a mark, getting a little advanced insight, having somebody help you run some searches, and even a slight word choice change can make the difference between a very protectable mark and one that is not very protectable.
So if, say, I want to um, trademark a phrase, call it ABC tagline, right?
Mhm.
Not tagline, a business name. I go out there and I notice the .com is not available. Someone else took it, and someone else is actually using it.
Mhm.
I searched the trademark database and it's not trademarked, right? If I go ahead and trademark that, will I get in, and will the office that is reviewing it be like, hey, go have a fight with this other company that has it and see who wins? How does that work if someone already is using it or has taken the name, but it's not registered?
Yeah, great question. And I get this a lot, like, "Oh, the domain was available, so I just went ahead and bought it, thinking like all is good in the world because the domain is available." Not true. People all the time register a phrase that's not an exact domain, or vice versa. They register a domain and they don't go protect the phrase. Simply owning the domain, first of all, is not enough. Two, just because somebody has a domain registered doesn't necessarily mean it's off limits. If they haven't done the steps to protect it, you could go technically file for and register that phrase or whatever. The question, the question becomes, are they going to be notified of the registration? Because, and let's talk about what's happening these days. There are a ton of trademark scam companies that monitor new filings. And as soon as a new filing is made, they will reach out to existing domain holders and say, hey, somebody just filed this registration, or, or even without a registration happening yet, your business is at risk, and they try to scare people into having to take some action around a potential trademark, right? This is why if you're at the point of buying a domain and you're going to, I mean, it may not be a big investment, but still, if you're going to build a whole brand around that, you better also be at the point of running a trademark search to find out, is this even available at the USPTO or at the Canadian equivalent of the trademark office? Because those two worlds are independent of each other. And just because one is available in one location doesn't mean that it's available in the other, right? And if they were to show up to the fight, let's pretend that you went to the cost and expense of actually filing a registration. They could show up still within the window of time required by the USPTO and claim
That they
prior
own it.
prior existing use. The trademark office, and whether you get a registration, it dates back to the first use in commerce. That is where you get to lay your stake in the ground, is when did you begin using that phrase, that mark, that logo in commerce. So on every application, you're going to have to put that date down. Somebody else, if they were using that mark ahead of you, there's the potential that they could block you from getting that registration.
Is that a court fight or is that a PTO office fight?
It's a PTO office fight, but they have their own court, their own legal proceedings inside of the USPTO office.
Interesting. So that could, if there's a conflict, it could go on forever before
It still
there's a
could be
result.
very expensive. Yeah. It's not something you want to have to engage in if you can have a strategy that avoids that.
It is expensive if it gets there?
Yes, it can be very expensive. And if
Interesting.
you're up against a company with resources, and all of my clients are small businesses, they generally don't want those kinds of fights, right? So it's better to be strategic ahead of time and understand what your options are.
Interesting.
Mm.
What are some of the common mistakes that people do online to that are maybe wrong or to that are not protected?
Yeah. I mean, there's some simple ones. One is generally just like some of the questions you've covered here, not really understanding the lay of the land when it comes to the use of language, right? So let's just talk about, for example, you throw up a website. I joke, like 15-year-olds in their mom's basement can build a website and be in business the next day and be technically driving down the freeway at 70 miles an hour, for an analogy, be in business, have no idea what the legal requirements are for that business, right? So not having terms up, not having privacy policies up, if they're somehow collecting data collection is a big one, right? And here's the thing, is it doesn't really matter what size you are. If you are collecting personal identifiable data, so this could be a first name and an email address. It could honestly just be Google Analytics. No opt-in forms. You're just running Google Analytics on your site. That is enough to identify, like down to device identifiers and geographic zones and zip codes, and sometimes to an exact address, who is interacting with your site. That qualifies. So you have to have privacy policies in place if you're collecting any kind of data. So that's a big one. A lot of people wait way too late in the game to do that stuff. And the challenge nowadays is that you are dealing with more informed consumers. People know they have rights around data. You have people that go looking to get onto business lists that are screwing it up so that they can bring certain claims against those businesses and collect damages, right? So understanding that throwing up a website comes with some legal obligations around disclosures and policies. Also, what statements are you making about your services, about potential outcomes, about, even client testimonials? What is being said in any of the language that you're using on your website? Because this stuff can really be scrutinized. And the FTC, right? You mentioned it earlier. The FTC is a regulatory body within the United States that acts as a consumer watchdog in relation to what claims are being made. Canada has its equivalent of these. If you were to Google, anybody listening, you could go Google provide me a summary of the truth in advertising rules, right? In the US, we have something called truth in advertising. Canada has its equivalent, right? These are generally going to be consistent in that you are required to make certain disclosures around certain types of language or even relationships. So, for example, let's talk for a minute about affiliate relationships. I have several clients right now that I've just done website reviews for where they've got like whole product affiliate stores, like pages almost of third-party products and affiliate, services and recommendations that they recommend. No affiliate disclosures, right? So
Does that mean that they should have an affiliate terms and conditions?
well, so a couple things. One, they should have a client or customer facing disclosure that says these are affiliate links. If you click through and make a purchase of any of these products or offerings through our website or through our email marketing, we will earn a commission. That's required.
Okay.
Okay, so you need an affiliate disclosure. If you have testimonials, and I just did another client site review who's got like Tony Robbins on his site shouting about his services, other people that are huge name brands saying, he's amazing, 9 figures in revenue, blah, like big claims. You cannot have a client say on your behalf something that you could not say about your own business on your behalf. What this means is that if you're putting testimonials onto your site that have these like significant numbers or other big claims in them, if that is not an outcome that you cannot guarantee for every client or every potential customer that engages your services, you need to have a disclaimer in place that says, results may not be typical. We cannot guarantee this outcome for every client.
But here's one client I've got a result for.
That's right. But it's about clear language. It's about helping to set client expectations. And basically across the board, whether you're describing your services, whether you're putting up a testimonial, clarity is the name of the game. Honesty, accuracy, clarity. And what this means is like, if you've got a friend, like if I were to say, Mustafa, you know me, give me a testimonial, I should be disclosing this is a friend of mine, right?
Not a customer.
That's right. Or if you have a family member that even if they love your product, your family member gets on there and is like, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You need to disclose. This is my cousin.
I just thought of something funny. Like if you get ChatGPT to write some fake reviews for you, you should probably disclose that. Like, made by ChatGPT, my imaginary friend.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know that there's so much silly stuff like this happening, which is so unfortunate. But yes, like don't do the bad behavior to begin with. But second of all, if there's anything that somebody learned about that relationship or like even a paid review, like I'll pay you to review my product or service, right? You have to disclose. Was there a payment or some kind of incentive that traded hands?
Mm-hmm.
How many product-based businesses are like, hey, we'll ship you a free product to some like name brand person. Just give us a review.
Yep.
Yeah, you technically need to disclose that. They received free product in exchange for this review. So this is where the truth in advertising, you'd have to ask yourself, is there any detail about this scenario that if somebody learned about it later would change their opinion about this language? Yeah, if I learned that this amazing review is like your best friend, probably changes my opinion about that review, right? So you need to be very proactive about just disclaiming that stuff and saying, here's the deal. And here's the other thing is that the language, the actual disclaimer language cannot be buried in small print in a footer. The FTC is very clear that it needs to be clear and conspicuously posted in proximity to the thing that necessitated the disclaimer in the first place.
Okay.
Right? So this is where even in Twitter,
be on the same page.
There was yes, and preferably close to the link. So if there's a link and it's an affiliate link, put an asterisk by it and immediately underneath it, put it, this is an affiliate link, right? It does not have to be a massive disclosure. You just have to help people understand what is happening. So like Twitter, there was a Twitter legal case where somebody was like, oh, I couldn't, in 140 characters, I couldn't post like both the thing and the disclosure. And the court was like, bullshit. Yes, you can. You can put hashtag sponsored, hashtag paid for, hashtag.
Hashtag my cousin.
That's right. That's right. So all of these excuses about it doesn't look pretty, or that's not convenient, or it was just down at the bottom of the page, like it's not gonna go very far.
Yeah. All right. So, gang, obviously you could tell Heather knows her stuff. If you have needs with figuring out your online presence, protecting yourself online, making sure your website is compliant, your marketing is compliant, definitely reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I will say briefly, I know we've kind of reached into like little pockets of information. I still want to emphasize the roadmap. Like if I can put a quick plug in for something, am I able to share a link with people?
100%.
It's a free resource. If you want the roadmap of like where do things fit, I have something called my 5 legal basics for legal success in business. And you can get it inside of my legal basics bootcamp. So if you just go to legalwebsitewarrior.com/legal basics bootcamp. In fact, if you just type legal basics, it probably will create the link for you. Legal basics bootcamp. And that is a free opt-in. It's like a mini training. You will get the map. I give away the map, and you will understand actually where each of the things that we just discussed, where they fit inside that map.
Absolutely. So say the link one more time, please.
Yeah. legalwebsitewarrior.com. That's just my main website /legal basics bootcamp. All one.
Legalwebsitewarrior.com /legal basics bootcamp.
Yep, I know it's kind of a mouthful. Lots of legal things happening right there in that phrase. Here is.
Here, I'll put it on the comments of the show.
Perfect.
So legalwebsitewarrior.com /legal basics bootcamp.
Yeah.
Beauty. So I know we have less than 5 minutes. Let me cover a couple of personal questions. Who's had a major influence on your business journey?
Oh, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my early business coaches. And this is why also it's just so important to bring the right people in to guide your journey. And this is when I was transitioning from doing strictly, I'm going to put in air quotes, traditional legal practice to also, oh, there's Roy. Awesome.
Yes.
I love Roy. Hi, Roy. To also creating my online business, Legal Website Warrior. My business coach, Jacob Roig, was like, and I didn't have a website, folks. This is the thing about like, people thinking they have to do things in certain order. All you need is an offer or a service that you can provide and know who you need to help. He was like, Heather, do you know who you need to help? I was like, yeah. He was like, okay, go straight to the top. Who do you need to help? And I knew I had big people in mind. Like we're talking industry leaders who were regularly in the news and being interviewed and blah, blah, blah. I had no idea how I would ever in a million years actually like interact with them. But I put a bunch of people on my list and I just reached out like, hey, I noticed that you've got an online website or an online presence that looks like this and you don't have adequate legal protections up. I can help you. This is what I do. Within a couple months, I had enrolled probably 80% of those people, including like dream clients, without even a website.
I love it.
And I was just like, that kind of a coach who like gives you one piece of like pinpointed advice.
Just one thing done.
Yeah, launched my second business.
Wow, that is amazing. Beauty. Heather, give me 2 of your favorite books of all time.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to take people over into the spiritual world. I would say James Hollis, he's got 2 books. I'm going to count them as one because they're little books. They're very deep, but they're short. The Middle Passage and Swamplands of the Soul. These are like real deal, the deep stuff in life kind of books. He's freaking brilliant. He's a Jungian psychologist, and he just is so compassionate and so brilliant in the way that he guides people through all kinds of life journeys. But the other one that was really paramount for me at certain stages in my adult development was a book called Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. It's just beautiful. And I mean, you'll see themes in those books. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of like real hard life stuff happening. And this is life in many instances. And I know entrepreneurs in particular end up facing a lot of hardship, and real life is always happening in the background of our businesses. And I think these books are just really profound in their ability to support people through the human side of the journey.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
Mhm.
And what's one piece of advice that made a big impact in your life or business?
Ooh, well, I mean, the one that I just shared, who do you serve, and just go straight to the top. That one was profound. One recently, and this one, I hope it makes people laugh. I have another current business coach that I've been working with for probably a year and a half now. And even on some really hard days when we've spoken, that there was one time he said to me, "Isn't life so silly?" He basically had no response to this kind of heavy thing that I had just presented him with. And honestly, that one phrase, "Isn't life so silly?" on days where I'm like, there's no way around this obstacle that I can see in this moment. It has really helped me to stay connected to my sense of humor. And I will say for years probably got disconnected from that. And also it's a core part of me. I think it's really important that whatever it is for you, even just a silly phrase, even a phone call to a sister, a friend, whoever it is, like stay connected to your sense of humor. It's like, especially now more than ever, where we have heavy, heavy, big things going on in the world. As a mom, it's essential that I be able to still connect to my lighter side. So that's it. That's the last piece.
Love it. Heather, where can people, well, for the record, I probably have another 2 hours worth of questions and discussions that we could easily do, but I guess we're going to do another part two down the road and cover
Totally. I would love
more
that.
stuff. Covering yourself online
Mhm.
is a big deal. And as a guy who's been doing online marketing for God since 2007, I think we could cover quite a few more things. And so
Yeah.
we will sometime down the road. Where can people find out more about you and get in touch?
Totally. Come join me over at my website, Legal Website Warrior. You will also find a podcast link on there. Mustafa has recently joined me on the podcast, so that episode should be dropping soon. I have other phenomenal guests. That would be a great way to quote unquote hang out with me. We talk about building businesses just like you do here, right? And so it's actually not legal related, but on my website are a ton of free legal resources, trainings, etc. So if you're getting started, just understand you don't have to know it all. You don't have to learn it all. It's about, just like in any area of life, it's about issue spotting. Can you learn enough to start to spot the issues so that you get the right help at the right time? That's it. Full stop.
Beautiful. So legalwebsitewarrior.com is
That's
your
right.
website.
Yep.
And guts, grit, and what was the last part?
Great business. I like
Yep,
alliteration, guts, grit, and great business. Yeah, it's really
that's
about
your podcast.
persevering. How do we persevere in business? How do we build lives that we love? It's a lot of fun conversations happening over there.
Beautiful. Well, Heather, thank you for joining me. Gang, like I mentioned before, if you have any legal questions for your business, do reach out to Heather. Make sure you're protected. Make sure you have your bases covered. Don't delay. Do not wait until you get into trouble, because it usually almost always costs a lot more when it's too late. That's probably another hour of example after
That's a
example.
separate conversation as we could like go through all the potholes that people step into. Yeah.
What I think we could title that podcast "What Not to Do." Your legal world.
Yeah.
There is there are a lot of, I think, dumb stuff people do.
Yes.
I'm probably guilty of that myself.
Listen,
Anyway, so
we do the best that we can, and little education goes a long way. So that's where I can
100%.
help.
So, Legal Website Warrior and Heather's podcast, if you search her name, there is a ton of stuff that will pop up, and do reach out. Thank you very much for joining us. You've been listening or watching another episode of the Executive Hub Show. Myself, Mustafa Hosseini, my amazing friend Heather Pearce Campbell. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you on our next episode.